£40. That was the price someone paid to destroy her tonight. 1,000 candles, silk, jewels, and a 19-year-old girl in a plain blue gown who had no idea she'd just been chosen. A pale finger lifted, pointed across the floor. That man over there. I dare you. On the balcony above, a figure in crimson was counting her footsteps. The way a cat counts a mouse's breaths. At the far end of the room, a man in black stood alone. For 2 years, no one had dared step inside the empty circle around him. The girl drew a breath and walked. She didn't know she was walking into a trap. She certainly didn't know the trap was about to spring on the wrong person. The candles. There were 1,000 of them, maybe more. Wren Ashby had stopped counting somewhere around the second chandelier. Light everywhere, bouncing off silk, off jewels, off the bare white throats of women who had never once in their lives worried about frost killing the turnips, and she stood at the edge of it all. 19 years old. In a pale blue gown her aunt had called sensible. Sensible. In a room like this, she might as well have worn an fleur sac and tied it with twine. Go on, then. The voice at her elbow was sweet. Too sweet. The kind of sweet that curdled milk. Phoebe Carlyle. Pretty as a painted miniature. And about as deep. You said you weren't afraid of London society. Well, here's your chance to prove it. Because that was the thing about a dare. You couldn't take it back. Not once it was spoken aloud. Not once the giggling started. And the giggling had started. 5 minutes ago, it had all seemed harmless. Champagne and laughter, and a little circle of girls who had, for one shining moment, seemed to want her there. Seemed to. Ask a gentleman to dance, they'd said. Any gentleman of your choosing. A rite of passage. Every newcomer did it during her first season. She should have known better. She should have known that when a whole room of strangers smiles at you all at once. Something is wrong. Why him? Wren had asked. Because they'd already chosen for her. A finger had lifted, pointed across the floor, to a man standing alone by the terrace doors. Oh, he's perfectly safe. This for girl named Clara, or Clarissa. Something with too many syllables to bother remembering. Terribly dull, that one. Never smiles, never speaks. You ask, he says no, or he says yes and stares at his shoes for one dance. Either way, you've done your duty, and then you escape. Simple, simple. Wren had learned, over 19 years, to distrust that word. She looked at him now, properly. The man they'd chosen for her ruin. He stood near the tall glass doors, dark-haired. Dressed in black so fine it seemed to drink the candlelight rather than throw it back, and around him, empty space. A clean ring of nothing. As though the whole crowded room had agreed, without a single word, passing between them, to leave a circle of air between their bodies and his. No one approached him. No one even looked, not for longer than a heartbeat. They glanced, and then they fled, eyes skittering away like startled birds. And he didn't seem to notice, or didn't care. He was watching the dark garden beyond the glass, as though the night out there held something far more worth seeing than every glittering soul behind him. A wallflower, then the most expensive wallflower in all of England. Her stomach turned over, because the girls were still watching her. The laughter held just behind their teeth, waiting, hungry, too late to run. She'd accepted in front of a dozen witnesses, and backing down now. That marked you, for the entire season. Coward, country mouse. The Yorkshire girl who lost her nerve at the first hurdle. Her aunt had brought her to London for opportunity, for a future. Not for this. Not for humiliation served up on a silver tray with the strawberries. So, Wren smoothed the front of her sensible blue gown, lifted her chin, the way her mother had taught her to lift it when the harvest failed and the neighbors came to gawk, and she crossed the floor. Each step, louder than the orchestra, she was certain of it. Certain the whole room could hear her slippers on the parquet. Certain the conversations were dimming in her wake. By the time she reached him, her cheeks were aflame, and her heart was somewhere up near her ears, hammering to get out. He didn't turn. Of course he didn't. He simply stood there, watching the dark, as if she were nothing more than a draft from a poorly fitted window. Say it, she told herself. Say it now. Say it before your courage walks out the door without you and leaves you standing here like a fool." "Excuse me," her voice came out steady. "A small miracle. A gift from God she hadn't earned. I wonder if you might do me the honor of the next dance." Nothing a breath, then another. The two longest breaths of her entire life, and then, slowly, as if it cost him something, he turned. His eyes were not what she'd braced for, not the cold, pale blue she'd imagined, not green like winter glass. Brown, deep brown, warm even, which made no sense at all, not paired with the way he was looking at her. The way her father used to look at a horse he was thinking of buying at the autumn fair. Checking the teeth, counting the flaws, calculating the worth. "You're new," he said. "Not a question. I arrived last week. From Yorkshire." She made herself hold his gaze. She would not look away first. She would not give him that. "My aunt is Honoria Ashby. Perhaps you know her. I know of her." His eyes slid past her shoulder, scanned the room. Slow, deliberate. The way a general reads a battlefield he expects to lose men on. Then came back to her face. And something moved there, behind the brown. Something almost like amusement. "And who, precisely," he said, "suggested you approach me?" The floor dropped clean out from under her. He knew, of course he knew. He'd been standing here the whole time, alone, watching everything. He'd probably seen the entire little play unfold from start to finish. The circle of girls, the pointing finger, the Yorkshire lamb sent trembling across the floor to the slaughter. Panic. Cold, climbing her spine one vertebra at a time. The giggling behind her had grown teeth now. "It was my idea. A dare. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt my evening of standing alone in corners, one eyebrow up. Don't apologize." His voice was dry as old paper left too long in the sun. "It's the single most interesting thing that's happened to me all night." And then, he held out his hand. Palm up, a challenge. "Though you ought to know what you're doing. Before you commit yourself to it." "What I'm doing," she said, "is asking you to dance." His voice dropped. Quiet. So quiet that only she could possibly hear it. "I am Julian Hartford, the Duke of Westmere." The room tilted, just slightly. Just enough to make her grip her own skirts. A duke, not a dull wallflower. Not a safe little nobody to dance with once and forget by morning. A duke, one of the most powerful men in all of England, standing alone in a crowded ballroom. Not because no one wanted him. Because no one dared. You did not simply walk up to a man like that. You did not ask him to dance, as you though he were some country squire at a village harvest assembly with still in his hair. And she had done exactly that. Behind her, the giggles had gone silent, replaced by something far worse. Gasps, whispers, the hiss of 100 indrawn breaths. The sound of a room that has just watched someone step calmly off a cliff. They'd set her up, perfectly. Watch the Yorkshire girl make a spectacle of herself before a duke. Watch her learn her place. "I should go," Wren whispered. She took a step back. "I didn't know. I'm so sorry, Your Grace." "Truly I." His hand caught hers. Not hard, not cruel, but certain. The way you'd catch something precious before it shattered on the floor. "Too late, Miss Ashby." He drew her forward. His grip was warm, steady, the hand of a man who had just decided something and would not be talked out of it. "You've made your request. Publicly, in front of half of London. I've accepted it. To refuse now would be a far greater scandal than your innocent little mistake." His mouth curved. Not quite a smile. The ghost of one. The memory of where a smile used to live. Besides, a pause. "I haven't danced in 2 years. It might be amusing. To remind them all that I still can." 2 years. She didn't have time to wonder why. Because he was already turning. Already leading her out onto the floor. And the crowd. The crowd parted before them like water before the prow of a ship. Conversations dying in 100 throats. And the orchestra, as if it had been holding its breath for this exact moment, struck up a waltz. Wren forgot how to breathe. She knew this. She knew how to dance. She'd practiced in a cold stone parlor in Yorkshire with her 3 brothers, stepping all over her feet, and her mother humming the time and laughing. She knew it in her bones. She just couldn't remember a single step of it now. "Relax," he murmured. He set them right. one hand at her waist, the other folding around hers with a gentleness that did not match his face at all. You are not being led to the gallows. Whatever it may look like to the audience, it feels like I am. The truth simply fell out of her. It kept doing that. Everyone is staring. They are always staring. He began to move, and her body remembered what her mind had lost. Her feet found his rhythm, followed his lead, and she realized with a small jolt of surprise that he was good, truly good, assured without showing off, strong enough to make her feel weightless in his hands, generous enough to give her just enough room to find herself. The trick, he said, is deciding whether you care. And do you? Not anymore. They turned through the first pattern. Smooth. The whole room a blur of envy and shock around the two of them. Though I suspect that you do, he went on. You're new enough to still want their approval. Their welcome. Is that so terrible? Not terrible. His eyes flicked past her shoulder. And this time something in his face hardened. Just for a moment. Just exhausting. And so very often. Disappointing. She followed the line of his gaze and caught it. An older woman, in a gown of deep crimson, watching them dance with an expression of pure, cold fury. And beside her, a beautiful blonde old girl, lovely as a porcelain doll on a mantel, whose pretty face had frozen into a mask of perfect disbelief. Who are they? The question escaped before she could trap it. A pause. A long one. Lady Augusta Vane, he said. And her daughter, Cordelia. Something dark moved beneath the words. Something with teeth. They have been working very hard. For 3 months now, to spread the rumor that Miss Vane and I have. An understanding. His jaw tightened until she heard it click. Tonight was meant to be the proof. A public demonstration. That the thing was already settled. Inevitable. And then she understood all of it. In one cold rush that left her cold to the fingertips. And by dancing with me instead, you have announced to 300 people that nothing whatsoever is inevitable, a turn. It brought them an inch closer. So you see, Miss Ashby, you've done me a great favor tonight. Even if you did it entirely by accident, I don't feel like I've done anyone a favor, she said. Honest again. She could not seem to stop being honest with this man. It was alarming. I feel like I've stepped into the middle of something I don't begin to understand. And for the first time, his face changed. Not the ghost of a smile this time. Something real, something softer. Almost kind. Welcome to London, he said. That particular feeling never entirely goes away. He paused. Then, gentler still, but if it's any comfort, your crime was innocence. Not malice, a beat. And that's rarer here than you would ever believe. The waltz ended, too soon, and not nearly soon enough. He released her. Bowed, with perfect, flawless propriety. Stepped back. Thank you for the dance, Miss Ashby. His voice carried, clear and deliberate across the hushed and breathless room. I hope you enjoy the rest of your season. Then he walked away and left her standing there, alone, in the dead center of the floor. While 300 people pretended very hard not to watch a Yorkshire girl stand with her heart caught fast in her throat. She made it back to her aunt, through sheer Yorkshire stubbornness, past the whispers rising behind her like the tide coming in over the flats. Well, said Aunt Honoria, dry as a desert in August. She took Wren's arm and steered her firmly toward the refreshments, as though nothing in the world had happened. I did tell you to make an impression upon London society. I simply expected it to take rather more than a single week. Wren said nothing. She couldn't. Her throat had closed, but her aunt only patted her hand once and reached for the strawberries. As if defiance were a thing you could teach a girl simply by refusing to be ashamed in public. The next morning came with calling cards, 7 of them, delivered before Wren had finished her eggs. Her aunt sorted through them the way a general reads battle maps before a campaign. Eyes narrowing, mouth twitching at one corner, Lady Penhallow, Mrs. Hartley, the Countess of Roxbury. She tapped the little stack against her palm. All of them wanting you at their gatherings this fortnight. How extraordinary, is it? Wren pushed her eggs around the plate in slow circles. She hadn't slept. I'd spent the whole long night replaying it. The eyes, the hand, The two words that had cracked her open like an egg against a bowl. I know of her. I rather thought I'd be a pariah after last night. The girl who didn't know a duke when he was standing in front of her. My dear child, her aunt fixed her with a look that was half amusement and half something far sharper. You danced with a man who has not danced with anyone in 2 years. You are not a pariah. You are a curiosity, and in this city, curiosity is hard currency. You could buy a season with it, but I didn't even know who he was. They must all be laughing at me this morning over their chocolate. Some are. Honoria never lied to soften a thing. It was one of the best things about her, the ones who set the trap. Certainly. But far more of them are sitting in their parlors at this very moment, wondering what on earth a turnip farmer's daughter could possibly have said. To make the Duke of Westmere versus nearly smile. He didn't smile, he nearly did. I was watching closely. She poured more tea. Precise, unhurried. As if they had all the time in the world and none of it mattered. He has not been seen to enjoy a single thing. Not since his father died. 2 years passed. She set the pot down with a small click. The dukedom came to him with considerable debt. And a great many complications. He has been under enormous pressure ever since to marry well, advantageously. Which is a very polite word for the vain girl, whose family controls several rather important votes in Parliament. Wren set down her fork. The eggs had gone cold, and she found she didn't care in the least. Then I really did ruin something. For him. Last night, our aunt met her eyes across the table. Direct, unflinching. You gave him a single evening's freedom, from being a commodity to be traded. From being a thing other people own, she let that settle. Do not underestimate the worth of that, Wren. These people live in cages. Cages built from other people's expectations, bar by bar. And sometimes the kindest thing a person can do for them is to forget, for one waltz, that the bars are even there. Before Wren could find anything at all to say to that, the butler appeared in the doorway. A card, on a silver tray. This just arrived, ma'am, by special messenger. For Miss Ashby, the paper was heavy, cream-colored, expensive enough to feel like a small accusation in her bare hands. She broke the seal. A crest pressed deep into red wax. Her stupid, traitorous heart skipped at the sight of it. Handwriting. Clear. The hand of a man who had never once doubted he'd be read. Miss Ashby. My mother hosts a musical evening on Tuesday next. Your aunt spoke most highly of your skill at the pianoforte. I hope you will consent to perform for us. We dine at 7 Westmere. Well, said Aunt Honoria, reading over her shoulder without one shred of shame. It seems your evening of social catastrophe has transformed itself into an opportunity. Or another trap, Wren said quietly. But even as the words left her mouth, she was already deciding what she would play. The Duke of Westmere's London house was everything she'd imagined, and nothing at all that she'd expected. The house itself was imposing. Pale stone, tall windows in flawless proportion. The kind of place that whispered, in a low and cultured voice, of old money and far older power. But the gardens told a wholly different story. Roses trained carefully along the walls, herbs in neat practical rows. A glimpse, past a gate, of fruit trees heavy with the last of the summer apples. Someone here loved growing things. Not merely owning them. It surprised her. It unsettled her even, because it was so much harder to be afraid of a man whose garden had carrots in it. Miss Ashby, a tall woman, descended the great staircase. Silver-haired, with the posture of someone who had never once slouched in 70 years of living. But her handshake was warm, firm, and her smile reached all the way up into her eyes and crinkled them. I am Beatrice Hartford, Westmere's mother, the Dowager Duchess. Thank you for coming. On such very short notice. Thank you for the invitation, Your Grace. I'm honored. The honor is entirely mine. Your aunt tells me you studied under Signor Bellini. Up in Yorkshire, her eyes, the very same warm brown as her son's, but without the armor bolted over them. I heard him play once, years and years ago. He had the most extraordinary hands, I confess. I am quite eager to hear what he managed to teach you. The drawing room was already full when they entered. And here was the strange thing. The thing Wren hadn't expected. She recognized faces from the ball, including Phoebe Carlyle, who had at least the decency to look profoundly uncomfortable when their eyes met across the carpet. But there were others too. Older guests, music lovers, people who had come for the art, and not for the gossip. He stood near the fireplace, deep in conversation with two men she didn't know. He'd traded his formal evening black for something simpler. A dark coat, a cream waistcoat, a cravat tied for practicality rather than for fashion. He looked younger like this, less like a duke, more like a man. He glanced up, as though he'd felt her looking at him from across the room. Their eyes met, and then someone asked him a question. And the moment broke clean in two. The next hour passed in a warm golden blur. Introductions, talk of composers and concert halls, and a soprano who'd disgraced herself in Vienna. And it was nothing, nothing at all like the ball. No hidden knives behind the smiles. No exhausting performance of belonging. These people loved music the way she loved it, as a thing that mattered all on its own, quite apart from who happened to be watching. When dinner was called, she found herself seated between an elderly baronet who wished to discuss the breeding of his foxhounds at length, and a young woman who raised hunting dogs in Kent, and directly across from her, the Duke, arguing about crop rotation. With an unexpected fire kindling in his voice, "The old three-field system is wasteful," he was saying, gesturing with his wineglass. "If a man rotates it properly, uses nitrogen fits crops in the fallow year." "You sound exactly like my father." It was out before she could stop it. The whole table turned to look at her. "He converted our entire property to the four-course system 5 years ago. The wheat yields rose by nearly 40% in 3 seasons. The Duke's attention snapped to her. Sharp, sudden, like a hawk that has spotted movement in a hedge. "Your father farms. We all do." Well, she felt the heat climb her neck under the weight of that focus. "I have 3 younger brothers. We all work the fields at harvest. Every one of us. My mother always said idle hands were the devil's own workshop. And she wasn't about to raise useless ornaments." Someone down the table laughed. Not unkindly, just genuinely surprised. But the Duke had gone very still, very intent. "So you actually understand land management." His voice had changed entirely, not merely the theory of it from a book. "I understand that good soil and honest work matter a great deal more than titles ever will." She chose the words with care. "If that's what you're asking me, that is exactly what I'm asking you." He set his glass down, "And you still found time to become an accomplished musician. My father always said culture and capability were not opposites. That a man could mend a fence and love Beethoven in the very same afternoon. We worked the fields by daylight, and played music by candlelight." A small smile. "Though my brothers always complained that I got the better end of the arrangement. Piano, you see, doesn't leave splinters." That surprised a real laugh out of him, a short one, but real. It seemed to catch even him off nouveau guard. "Your brothers sound wise." Was that amusement warming his voice? "I am beginning to suspect that Yorkshire produces remarkably practical people. We call it common sense," Wren said. "London tends to call it provincial." "London," he said, quieter now, just for her, "very often confuses complexity with sophistication." Their eyes held. A moment too long, then his mother rose to lead the ladies away. And the spell broke, again, as it always seemed to, between them. The piano in the drawing room was a magnificent thing, a Broadwood grand, ivory keys that felt like cool silk beneath her fingers. She chose Beethoven, the 14th Sonata, partly because she knew it well enough to vanish completely inside it, and partly because the melancholy of it suited her mood that night. She closed her eyes and let her hands remember what they'd been taught. The first movement flowed through her like water over stone. Soft, inevitable. She felt the whole room go silent around her, felt the weight of all those eyes settle on her shoulders, and it did not matter, not even a little, because this was the one place in the world where she had never once doubted herself, the one language she spoke without a trace of an accent, no matter who happened to be listening. When the last notes faded into the air, The silence held, long, and then it broke into applause. "Extraordinary," said the Dowager Duchess, her voice thick with something genuine and unguarded. "Miss Ashby, you have a rare and precious gift." She played twice more. Mozart, and then Chopin. And each time she felt the same deep rightness settle into her bones like warmth from a fire. It wasn't until the guests began to drift toward their carriages that she found herself alone with him, in the entrance hall, his mother occupied somewhere with farewells. The careful distance he'd kept all evening, suddenly grown very thin indeed. "You didn't tell me you were that good," he said. "No preamble, none at all. You didn't ask. You simply sent an invitation and assumed a fair point." He studied her, that assessing look again. But softer now, worn at the edges like a coin handled too often. "Why, Yorkshire?" he asked. "Bellini could have placed you anywhere in the world. London, Paris, Vienna. You could have performed professionally. On the great stages, my family was in Yorkshire." She met his gaze and held it. "That mattered more to me than impressing rooms full of strangers ever could. Even though it meant giving up something you so clearly love, I didn't give it up. I only chose how I would keep it." She paused, because there was something underneath his questions. Something raw and unhealed. "Why do you ask?" A long moment. "The clock ticked because I find myself wondering," he said, low. "Whether you regret it. Choosing roots, over recognition, safety over the wide, bright world. Do you regret yours?" she asked. And for one single heartbeat. She thought he might actually answer her. His mouth opened. Something flickered behind the brown of his eyes. The truth, perhaps. Trying very hard to claw its way out. But then Aunt Honoria appeared, to collect her. And the Duke stepped neatly back. Behind the careful courtesy of a host, "Thank you for performing, Miss Ashby. I do hope we'll see you again. Thank you for inviting me, Your Grace. All proper, all correct. And utterly, completely, insufficient." For whatever had been running between them in that hall, like a current beneath still water. In the carriage home, Aunt Honoria was quiet, unusually so. Until they were nearly back to the square and the horses' hooves had found their steady rhythm on the cobbles. "He likes you," she said finally. "He barely spoke to me all evening." Exactly. Her aunt's smile was knowing in the dark of the carriage. "He barely spoke to anyone, but he listened to you. He watched you. That man has forgotten how to want a thing, without first calculating precisely what it will cost him." She patted Wren's hand where it lay in her lap. "You reminded him that some things have a value, far beyond their use." "I played piano, Aunt Honoria. That is all that happened. Keep telling yourself that, dear. If it helps you sleep." She settled back against the cushions. "Though I will say, I haven't seen a man look at a woman quite like that. Not since your uncle looked at me." Across a crowded assembly room. 43 years ago this autumn, Wren turned to the window and said nothing. But she pressed her hand to the cold glass and felt her own heartbeat in her fingertips and did not sleep at all that night. 3 days later, another invitation, a garden party, at the country estate, Thornmere, 20 miles outside of London. Half the ton would be there in their summer finery, and the note mentioned, almost too casually to be casual, that the Dowager Duchess very much hoped Wren might bring her music, should anyone wish for some informal entertainment in the afternoon. "It's a test," her aunt said, reading it through with shrewd eyes. "Beatrice is presenting you to society, under her own personal protection. If people see that the Dowager Duchess of Westmere approves of you, then the gossip from the ball will simply fade away, like morning mist off the river. Or it makes things a great deal worse," Wren said. "Makes them all think I'm climbing. Reaching above my station. You are climbing, dear. We are all of us climbing, every hour of every day. The only real question that matters is whether you do it honestly." She set the invitation down on the table between them. "But if you'd rather decline it, send our regrets. Plead a headache. No." The word surprised her with its own firmness. "No. I'll go, because despite the risk, despite every sensible bone in her sensible body telling her to stay well away from this man and his glittering, dangerous world, she wanted to see him again. Wanted to understand the man who argued of crop rotation with the very same fire that he watched her play Beethoven. Wanted to know, once and for all, whether the thing she'd felt in that entrance hall was real, or merely one more London illusion. A trick of candlelight and loneliness, she found out 3 days later. But not at all in the way she'd expected. It was the afternoon before the garden party. Wren had gone walking with her aunt's maid through the little green park near the square, to clear her head, to stop thinking about brown eyes and sentences that never quite finished themselves. And that was where she heard them, two voices, behind a tall yew hedge. One of them she knew at once, Phoebe Carlyle, sweet and flat and entirely too pleased with herself. Wren froze on the gravel path. She should have walked on. She knew that she should. A lady did not eavesdrop, but her name. Someone behind that hedge had just said her name. The Ashby girl, yes. It worked rather beautifully, didn't it, Phoebe? Laughing low, she marched right up to him, bold as brass. Just exactly the way we planned it, a second voice answered. Cool, older. A voice well used to being obeyed without question. You did very well, child. The dare was a clever little touch. I shall remember it. Wren's blood went cold in her veins. I only did what you asked of me, Lady Augusta. You promised you'd cover my dressmaker's account for the whole season, if I only made certain that a suitable little nobody approached him at the ball and made a thorough fool of herself in front of everyone, Lady Augusta. Vain. The woman in crimson, the mother of the porcelain doll. Yes, the cool voice again, satisfied as a cat with cream. It should have humiliated her quite thoroughly, put the little upstart firmly in her place, sent her scurrying right back to her turnips and her pigs where she belongs. A pause. Hard as cut stone. We did not, of course, anticipate that he would actually dance with her. That was unfortunate. But no matter in the end. The girl is still nothing. A novelty. A 9 days wonder. And novelties always fade, given time. Continue to watch her for me. Tell me where she goes, whom she speaks with. I shall attend to the rest myself. Footsteps, moving away across the grass. And Wren stood there, behind the hedge, very, very still. The dare hadn't been a game. It had never once been a game. She'd been chosen, hunted, set loose across that ballroom floor like a hare flushed deliberately for the hounds. Not by silly girls with too much champagne in them. By that woman, by the Vanes. She'd been a piece. On a board she hadn't even known she was standing on. And the worst of it, the part that made her stomach drop straight through the cold ground beneath her slippers, the very thing they had meant as her ruin, was the only reason he had ever once looked at her at all. She didn't sleep that night. How on earth could she? She lay in the dark with the cruel words turning over and over behind her eyes. A suitable little nobody. Sent scurrying back to her turnips. And the worst part of all, the part that kept her staring up at the ceiling until the gray light crept in beneath the curtains, was that the dare had worked exactly backward. They had meant to break her into pieces. Instead, they had handed her straight to him. So which was she then, the fool? Or the luckiest girl in England? She didn't know. And the not knowing, that was its own particular kind of torture. By morning she had made a decision. She would say nothing, not yet. Because what on earth was there to say? Your Grace, I have learned that our entire acquaintance began as a deliberate cruelty, designed by your bitterest enemies, to shame us both. No, she would go to the garden party. She would hold her head up high, and she would watch the Vans. Exactly the way they had been watching her all along. Let them think the hare didn't know it was being hunted. Thornmere unrolled before them like a green dream out of a storybook rolling hills. A silver lake that caught the afternoon sun and threw it back in pieces. And the house itself. Golden stone. Large enough to impress any visitor, but not so large that it felt like a tomb you might get lost in. Someone, somewhere in its history, had let wildflowers grow along the entire length of the drive. Poppies and cornflowers and ox-eye daisies. Cheerful chaos crowding right up against the formal disciplined roses. It made her chest ache, the sight of it, because it was beautiful. And because she now knew, with cold certainty, That it was a battlefield. Not quite what you expected, her aunt murmured beside her. No, Wren said. Softer. The London house is built to intimidate visitors. This is where they actually live. The party was already well underway when they arrived. Guests scattered across the south lawn in little clusters of silk and laughter. Servants drifting between them with champagne and dishes of strawberries and cream. A string quartet, playing in the dappled shade beneath the great oaks. And there, by the marble fountain, holding court like a queen who has already won her war, Cordelia Vane, blonde hair, shining like new-minted gold in the sun. Laugh ringing out across the lawn like a little bell designed by a craftsman for the single purpose of making every head turn toward her. And beside her, looking considerably less delighted about the whole arrangement, stood the Duke. Deep breath now. Aunt Honoria said low, "You were invited here by name. You belong here as much as any of them. Don't you dare let some scheming chit make you forget it." The Dowager Duchess found them before Wren could answer, warm, affectionate, pulling Wren straight into the crowd by the arm. "Miss Ashby, how perfectly lovely. Come along. Let me introduce you to a few people who have been asking after your playing all week." And for nearly an hour, it almost worked. Beatrice was strategic in her introductions. Surgical, even. Each one paired with a quiet word about Wren's talent, her cleverness, her training, making it clear, again and again and again, that this invitation was real, that it was no charity. Slowly, Wren felt her shoulders come down from around her ears. These people weren't judging her, they were curious. And curiosity she could manage. It was the heat that finally undid it all. The heat drove everyone toward the shade. And the shade was precisely where Cordelia Vane was waiting for her. Miss Ashby, honey, poured slow over the edge of a blade. How very kind of the Dowager Duchess to take such an interest. In our newest arrivals, 2 girls flanked her. Wren knew them both from the ball. Phoebe's set, professional admirers of cruelty. Connoisseurs of it, she has always been so generous, Cordelia went on, smiling. To those in genuine need of patronage, the girls tittered on cue. Like trained birds. "How kind of you to notice," Wren said. "Level though I received my invitation through an interest in music. Not need. Perhaps the distinction isn't quite clear to everyone here." Cordelia's smile sharpened at the edges. "Oh, we all heard about your little performance the other evening. My mother said you played, very enthusiastically." A pause. "Delicate, poisonous as foxglove." "That's a generous word for too loud. I prefer to think of it as with feeling," Wren said. "Though I do understand that some people find genuine emotion rather uncomfortable to be near genuine." Cordelia laughed. "Crystalline. Cold as the bottom of a well. Oh, my dear, you're from Yorkshire. Half the ton already believes you walked all the way here behind a plow horse." Only half." Wren allowed herself the very smallest of smiles. "Then I must be far more refined than I dared to hope." "You're certainly bold." The voice dropped. "The lovely mask slipping. Dancing with a duke you'd never been introduced to. Accepting invitations to his family home. Performing for his mother. Some might call all that presumptuous. Calculating even. And here was the thing. Wren had spent the whole long night with Lady Augusta's words ringing inside her skull. A suitable little nobody. The dare was a clever touch. And she was tired. So very tired of swallowing it all down. And some, she said, might call trying to force an engagement through 3 months of rumor and pressure. Desperate, silence. Beseagull. Ringing. Cordelia's lovely face went red. Then white. Her mouth opening. Closing. No sound at all coming out of it. The 2 girls beside her looked genuinely, deliciously shocked. Wren's heart slammed against her ribs like a fist on a door. Too far. You've gone too far this time. That was exactly the kind of thing that got a girl exiled from polite society for good. The kind of thing her aunt would have to spend a year apologizing for. And yet, she could not bring herself to regret one single word of it. "Excuse me," she said, with every last shred of dignity she could scrape together. "I believe I need some air." And she turned, and she walked, toward the rose garden. before her knees could betray her in front of all of them, half expecting outraged voices to come chasing her down across the lawn. But none came. Only silence followed her, heavy, judging, somehow worse than any shout could ever be. She found a stone bench, hidden away between two arches of climbing roses, and she sat down hard, before her legs gave out from under her entirely. What had she done? Her aunt had brought her to London for a future, for a good marriage and a respectable life. And here, in the space of a single hot afternoon, Wren had insulted the daughter of one of the most powerful families in all of England. At a ducal garden party, in front of a dozen witnesses who would carry the tale to 100 more by nightfall. This was worse than the dare. Far, far worse. Because this one she'd done entirely to herself. That, said a voice from the entrance to the garden, was either incredibly brave or incredibly foolish. Her head snapped up, the Duke, hands in his pockets, expression unreadable as a closed book. I think we both know which one it was, Wren said. Quiet. I should leave. Before I make it worse than I already have. By telling the truth, he came closer, studied her with that same intensity she remembered from the dance. Cordelia has been spreading rumors about an engagement. For 3 full months, everyone in London knows it. And no one at all, has ever said it aloud. A pause. You just did. At a garden party. In daylight, that doesn't make it appropriate. No, he sat down beside her on the bench, close enough to feel improper, far enough to remain a gentleman. But it makes it honest. And I am finding, lately, that I value honesty a very great deal more than I value being appropriate. She looked at him properly, for the first time since he'd arrived in the garden. His cravat slightly loosened in the heat, his dark hair ruffled, as if he'd been dragging his hands through it. He looked tired, younger than his 28 years. And there it was again, that pull, that dangerous, traitorous pull, toward a man whose entire glittering world had just tried to use her as a weapon and then discard her. Are you engaged to her? She asked, blunt as a Yorkshire spade. Because if you are, then I owe her an apology, no matter what I happen to think of her. No, firm, final. A door closing. I have told Lady Augusta so, repeatedly, to her face. She chooses not to believe me, or rather, she chooses to make it true. Through the sheer relentless force of rumor, then why not say so? Publicly, once. And be done with it. His jaw tightened, because her husband controls votes that I need. For a piece of legislation that I care about more than I can easily explain. Because making a true enemy of Lord Vane would cost me more than I can presently afford to lose. Because, sometimes, his voice went flat. Bitter, the dukedom demands that I be strategic. Instead of simply decent. That sounds exhausting. It is. You have no idea. He turned to face her fully on the bench, which is precisely why your company has been. Unexpectedly. Refreshing. You say what you mean, Miss Ashby. Plainly. You don't weigh every single word for advantage before you let it past your teeth. And there it was. The thing she'd been holding behind her own teeth all day long. Because he thought her honest. He thought her the one clean true thing in his whole poisoned little world. And the truth, the bitter truth, was that their entire acquaintance had been built upon a lie. A lie she now knew all about. And he did not tell him. Tell him right now. About the Hedge, about Phoebe, about his own enemy paying good money for your public humiliation. Oh, I calculate, she said instead, Coward. Coward. I just do it very badly. That surprised a laugh out of him. A real one. Unguarded. And it transformed his whole face, erased the careful armored control. Showed her, for one single instant, the man he must have been, before duty came and buried him alive. You calculate terribly, he agreed. It's perfectly wonderful. And she smiled back at him. And said nothing at all about the Hedge, because she was a fool, and because some frightened part of her was terrified, bone deep, that the truth would take this away, this one warm thing. In a whole long season of cold, she would find out later, of course, exactly what telling him too late would cost her, but not yet, for now. The Dowager was orchestrating everyone toward the terrace, where the piano had been carried out into the open afternoon air. Perfect timing, she said. eyes far too knowing for comfort. Miss Ashby, would you indulge an old woman and play for us all? It was a rescue and a test in a single breath. Wren understood that perfectly, a chance to remind every soul on that lawn exactly why she had been invited. Under the Dowager Duchess's own personal banner, I'd be honored, Your Grace. The piano was slightly out of tune from being moved out of doors. The afternoon was hot enough to wilt the roses, and she could feel Cordelia's hatred from clear across the terrace like heat coming off an open stove. But the moment her hands touched the keys, all of it fell away. Vivaldi this time. Bright. Technical. Impossible to play while thinking of anything else in the world. She built from it into a Mozart concerto that made her fingers fly and her own heart race to keep up. 3 pieces without once stopping, until her hands ached and a sheen of sweat dampened her temples. And the applause. The applause when she finished was thunderous. Even Cordelia Vane could not argue with skill that plain. That undeniable. Magnificent, the Dowager said, embracing her right there on the terrace in front of everyone. Absolutely magnificent, my dear, and the whole afternoon turned on that single moment. People came to her now, to compliment her playing, to ask after her training, to request their own favorite pieces with shy smiles. She was no longer the provincial girl who'd been dared into dancing with a duke. She was the musician the Dowager Duchess of Westmere had championed before the entire ton. It was intoxicating, and it was terrifying. In exactly equal measure, but the Vannas were not finished with her. They were only changing their weapon. The change came a week later, at a dinner, the Duke's own dinner, at his London house, mostly political contacts, he'd warned her in his note. Tedious and strategic, utterly lacking in genuine conversation. He'd asked her there anyway. He'd asked, he said, for one honest person in the room. She should have said no. She knew it even as she wrote out her acceptance. Lord Vane held court at one end of the long table, pontificating about trade tariffs to anyone who couldn't escape him, while the Duke listened with the polite expression of a man calculating crop yields in his head. Lady Augusta sat across in emerald silk, smiling at everyone with her mouth and no part of her eyes, tracking Wren's every breath like a cat watching a mouse it has already, in its own mind, finished eating. And Cordelia, positioned directly across from the Duke, sparkling, flirting, fighting her whole war through sheer relentless force of will. "Don't you agree, Your Grace?" she asked. For the 3rd time that evening. A proper ducal residence requires at the very least 12 guest rooms. Anything fewer is simply inadequate for entertaining. "I have 14, the Duke said, neutral as a stone wall. "I rarely fill more than 2. "Oh, but you will. Once you marry," a glance at Wren, calculated, sweet as arsenic in the sugar. "The obligations increase so very dramatically. A duke's wife must be prepared for constant entertaining. It can be quite demanding. For those accustomed to simpler circumstances, Miss Ashby manages her aunt's entire household," the Dowager Duchess cut in. Smooth as poured silk, she has proven herself more than capable of navigating society's little demands. Of course, Cordelia's tone said precisely the opposite. "I simply meant that the role requires certain refinements, family connections of long standing, a proper understanding of political necessity. It requires competence." The Duke's voice sliced clean across the whole table like a blade. "Everything else is mere decoration." Silence. Lady Augusta's smile froze solid on her face. And that, Wren would think later, much later, that was the exact moment the Van decided she had to be destroyed. Not slowly. Not eventually, now. The men stayed behind for their port. The women withdrew to the drawing room. And the moment the door clicked shut, Lady Augusta dropped the mask entirely. "He is being deliberately obtuse," she said, sharp with fury. "Everyone of any consequence knows he needs our support in the Lords. This resistance of his, is nothing but stubborn, childish pride." "Perhaps," said Aunt Honoria, with dangerous gleaming sweetness. "He simply doesn't wish to marry your daughter, Lady Augusta. It happens." The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. "He will come around to reason," Lady Augusta said. her composure cracking at the very edges. Once he understands that his alternatives are limited. Limited how? Wren asked, before she could stop herself, and the woman's gaze fixed on her. Slow. Like a snake finally locating the mouse in the corner. Limited by reality, my dear. The Duke requires a wife of breeding, of connection, of fortune, not some provincial little musician who stumbled into his notice. Through a foolish dare at a ball, the words landed like fists. Wren felt the heat climb her neck, anger and humiliation roaring up together in her chest. And then she remembered the Hedge. The dare was a clever touch. I'll cover your dressmaker's account. This woman, this very woman, sitting before her in emerald silk, had paid for that dare with her own money, had set the whole cruel thing in motion herself, and now sat here, in a duke's drawing room, calling it Wren's foolish little stumble. Something inside her chest snapped clean through. At least I am honest, Wren said, quiet, shaking with it, about what I am. I have never pretended to be otherwise. I have never arranged things, in secret, to force another person's hand, a flicker in Lady Augusta's eyes, just the smallest flicker. But Wren saw it, and caught it. She knows that I know. How dare you? The woman breathed. How dare I? Wren rose to her feet, abandoning every last scrap of politeness. Your daughter has told half of London that she is engaged to a man who has never once proposed to her. You have used pressure, and rumor, and worse besides, to manipulate him into a marriage he plainly does not want. And you stand there and call me the problem? Wren, her aunt warned. Low, but she was past it now. Weeks of swallowed words, boiling all the way over at last. I may be provincial, and awkward, and entirely unsuited to your fine world. But at the very least, I am not trying to trap a man into marriage. Through lies, you foolish little girl. Lady Augusta's voice turned to pure ice. You truly believe he cares for you? You are a distraction, a novelty, a passing amusement. The very moment he understands what refusing us will cost him, he will do what is necessary, as men like him always do. And you will be forgotten by McColmus. Perhaps, Wren said, but at least I will not have forced him into anything. And she walked out. Before her composure could shatter where any of them could see it fall, she made it as far as the library before the tears came, tears of anger and shame, and the horrible creeping suspicion that the dreadful woman might be right about all of it. Miss Ashby. She spun. The Duke, in the doorway. Improper. Scandalous. The two of them alone in a closed room. And she could not bring herself to care one bit. My mother sent me. I heard raised voices through the wall. He stepped in, closed the door behind him. What did Lady Augusta say to you? The truth. Most likely, she scrubbed at her wet eyes with the back of her hand. That I am a foolish provincial who doesn't know her proper place. That you are only being kind to me. But that I am temporary, a diversion. Until you do what is necessary, and you believe her, I don't know. It burst out of her. Ragged, torn. I don't know how any of this is supposed to work, I thought. She stopped herself. You thought what? He moved closer, his voice low and intent. I thought you actually liked my company. The words shook coming out. That the conversations were real. That the way you looked at me when I played meant something. But perhaps I am simply naive. Confusing courtesy. With care, her name like it was a wound he was pressing. Look at me. She did. Reluctantly, and found his face stripped clean of all its careful armor. I have not been courteous, he said. I have been terrified. Because you are right. I do care more than I should, faster than makes any sense at all, and it terrifies me down to my boots. Because caring makes a man vulnerable, in ways that I cannot afford to be, then why? Because the alternative is so much worse. He took her hands. Warm. Steady. A whole life spent calculating. Marrying a woman I respect but cannot love. Becoming, inch by inch, exactly the kind of duke my father was before me. Powerful, respected, lonely, and hollow. Hollow all the way through to the center. His voice dropped to almost nothing. You make me remember the man I once wanted to be. Before I became the man I had to be, and this was the moment, because he was looking at her like she was water in a drought. Saying she made him honest, and every single word of it was built on a foundation she knew to be rotten through, because their whole beginning was a cruelty, paid for in coin by his own enemy, and he did not know it, and she did, and telling him now, in this quiet room, with his warm hands wrapped around hers, she opened her mouth, tell him about the hedge. Tell him now while he is holding your hands and looking at you like that. Tell him before. There's something you should know, she said, and the door opened. The Dowager, forgive me, truly. But the Venas are leaving, Julian. Your guests are asking for their host. And the moment shattered, like dropped glass, like everything else between them always seemed to. We will speak later, he murmured, and he was gone. Back to the duty waiting for him out in the hall, and Wren stood there. Alone, with the truth still trapped, unspoken, burning a hole clean through her chest. She should have run after him. She would understand. That later, far too late. She should have caught his sleeve and dragged him back into that room and told him every last word of it. Instead, she went home, and the truth waited, and waiting, as it turned out, was the single most expensive thing she ever did. The scandal broke 3 weeks later, timed. Wren would understand only afterward. For the maximum possible damage, she was at a musical afternoon at Lady Penhallow's when the whispers first began, heads bending together behind fans, eyes cutting toward her, something poised between pity and pure glee. By the time she found her aunt across the room, everyone already knew, someone, and it took no genius at all to guess exactly who, had spread a rumor that Wren Ashby had been seen leaving the Duke of Westmere's London house, late at night, quite alone, with no chaperone anywhere in sight. The meaning was clear, and it was vicious. She was trying to trap him into marriage through manufactured scandal. It isn't true, Wren said, numb, as her aunt steered her toward the carriage and away from the staring eyes. I was never once there without you, or without his mother present. Never. The truth doesn't matter, Honoria said, grim. Not when the lie is so much more interesting to repeat. Someone wants you ruined, child, thoroughly, before Westmere can declare anything at all in your favor. There was a note waiting for her at home. Not from Lady Augusta. Not this time. From a concerned friend, it claimed. Detailing supposed midnight visits in Loving, invented detail, claiming she'd been seen slipping in at the servant's entrance like a thief. Speculating, oh so very sweetly, about how a provincial little nobody had managed to catch a duke's wandering eye. But it was the second note that broke her. It came an hour later, by special messenger, and the handwriting was elegant and cruel. Miss Ashby, I write only to spare you further embarrassment. The Duke and my daughter have at last come to an arrangement. The contracts are even now being drawn up by his solicitors. He understands, as you yourself should, that affection must not always yield to duty in the end. I enclose a copy of the betrothal terms, witnessed and signed, so that you need not take my word alone for it. Withdraw now, child, with whatever small dignity remains to you. And there, folded carefully behind it, a document heavy paper, a seal she recognized at once, the crest that had once made her stupid heart skip in her chest, and a signature at the very bottom of the page, Westmere, his name. In bold, clear ink, Wren's hands began to shake. She read it 3 times, and each time the room tilted further on its axis. Each time she felt smaller, more foolish, more entirely certain that everything Lady Augusta had ever said to her was nothing but the plain, cold truth. He'd signed it. He had made the practical choice, the strategic one, exactly as the woman had promised he would, and she hadn't even been worth a goodbye. What is it? Her aunt said, sharp with sudden alarm. Wren, your face. What has happened? But Wren couldn't speak. Her throat had closed completely. She simply held out the page, and watched her aunt read it, and watched her aunt's clever face change as she reached the bottom. This is... Honoria stopped, frowned hard at the signature. Wren. Now wait, I'm going home, Wren said, hollow as a dry well, to Yorkshire, tomorrow, on the first coach. Wren, you don't know that this is genuine. I am holding his signature in my hand, Aunt Honoria. Her voice cracked straight down the middle, like river ice in spring. What more is there left for me to know? That night she packed, folded her gowns with slow mechanical hands, the pale blue one on the very top. The sensible one. The one she'd worn the night a lie sent her trembling across a ballroom floor, and into the arms of a man who, it now turned out, had only ever been calculating her cost. Like everything else in his careful, hollow, ruined life, she told herself it was better this way. So much better. To leave before she was pushed out the door. To go home. To turnips and brothers and a piano in a cold stone parlor, where no one would ever again look at her like she was water in a drought. She did not cry. She'd done quite enough of that already. She just packed. And 20 miles away. In a golden house full of wildflowers. The Dowager Duchess of Westmere held a betrothal document in her own 2 hands. A document her son had never seen, had never signed. A forgery so very good that it had fooled even the girl who loved him, and Beatrice Hartford, who had already buried one hollow man in her long life, and who absolutely refused to stand by and watch her own son become a second, picked up her pen. The trunk was nearly full, 1 gown left, the pale blue one, sitting on the bed where she'd set it down, staring up at her like an accusation she couldn't quite answer. Wren picked it up, folded it once, twice, and could not bring herself to put it into the trunk, because that gown had started everything, and the ending of everything. Somehow felt as if it should be done in some other dress entirely. She set it on the chair instead, and told herself she would deal with it in the morning. The clock downstairs struck 11, then 1/2 past. The house had gone quiet around her. Aunt Honoria had finally stopped arguing and gone up to bed, though not before saying, one last time, low and stubborn from the doorway, "You do not know that it is real, Wren." As if a signature could be anything other than real. As if she had not held his very crest in her own 2 trembling hands. She blew out the candle, lay down in the dark, and waited for a sleep that would not come for her. And at midnight, someone knocked on the door. Not the front door. Her door. Quiet. Urgent. She almost didn't answer it. She was half undressed, wrung out, empty as a dry well in August. But something, some stubborn foolish thing buried deep in her chest, made her pull on her wrapper and open it. The Duke stood in the hallway, disheveled, wild-eyed, his coat thrown on crooked over his shoulders, as though he'd ridden hard through the dark and had not once stopped to think about how he might look at the end of it. "You're leaving," he said. Not a question. In the morning. On the first coach, she kept the door half closed between their bodies. She could not bear to see all of him at once. It's better this way, for everyone. You should make the practical choice. I understand it. Truly, I can't stay here and watch you do it. Better for whom? For both of us. Her voice cracked. She hated it for cracking. Those people need your legislation. You've worked 2 years for it. I won't let you throw it all away. For what? He stepped closer, past the edge of the door, improper and urgent and far, far past caring about any of it. Say it. For me. The word tore itself out of her. I am not worth it. I am nobody, Julian. A girl who plays piano and doesn't understand your world and keeps making everything worse. Wherever she goes, stop. It's true, Wren. His hands came up, as if to take her by the shoulders, then stopped, hovering in the air between them. What did Lady Augusta send you? Tell me. Now her breath caught hard in her chest. How do you? Because my mother sent for me 3 hours ago. Because she told me a forgery had been delivered to this house. Because I have been riding through the dark ever since. He was breathing hard. Show me. Whatever it was she sent you. Show me. Now. Please. She didn't move. So he said it again, softer this time. Like a man who already knows the answer to his question. And is terrified of it all the same, Wren. Please. She crossed to the trunk, lifted the heavy lid, pulled the cruel cream paper out, from where she'd buried it beneath her folded shawls, and held it out to him in the candlelight. He took it. And he read. And she watched his face change as he read, watched his jaw go tight as a drawn bowstring, watched his eyes reach the signature at the bottom of the page, and stop, and go very, very still. This is my crest, he said. Lo, this is, almost, my own hand. It is your hand. It's your signature. I held it. It is not. He looked up at her, and there was something in his face she had never once seen there before. Not in the ballroom. Not in the rose garden. Not in the library. Fury. Pure and cold and absolute. I have never signed a betrothal contract. Not to Cordelia Vane. Not to anyone living. This, he held the page up between them in the candlelight. This is a forgery. A very good one. Good enough to fool you completely. Which means it was made to. Which means they paid a great deal of money. To drive you clean out of England. With a lie on paper, the room spun. Slowly. The wrong way round, but the seal. A seal can be copied by any competent engraver. A hand can be copied. Given enough time and enough coin, his voice was shaking now, not with fear. With rage. Look at me. I did not sign this thing. I would never sign this thing. I have spent the last 3 weeks doing the precise opposite of signing this thing. What does that mean? He let the paper fall from his fingers. It drifted to the floorboards between them like a dead leaf falling from a branch. It means I have been in rooms. Every single night. For 3 weeks. With men I genuinely despise. Making promises I'll regret. Trading favors I can't spare. Building a coalition. Vote by painful so that I could pass the tenant bill. Without Lord Vane. Without ever once selling myself to that family. Without ever having to choose. Between doing right by 10,000 strangers I'll never meet. And doing right by you. She stared at him. Trying to make the words fit. You said you'd been at meetings. I have. Not to find a way to marry Cordelia Vane. To find a way I would never have to, he laughed. Short. Bitter. And while I was out there, doing it, while I was saving the one single thing that would let me keep you, her mother slipped a forged contract beneath your door, and very nearly won the whole war. Wren's knees gave out beneath her. She sat down hard on the edge of the bed, because she'd believed it. That was the thing she could not get past. She had believed it so completely. She'd packed her trunk and folded her gowns, and decided in one cold hour that he was hollow, just like his father, and the whole time, the whole entire time, he'd been out there fighting for her, in rooms full of powerful men who hated him. I almost left, she whispered. I almost got on that coach, and you would have come back here, and I'd have been gone, and you would never have known why I went. I know. He knelt down in front of her on the floorboards, so that they were eye to eye. Which is exactly why I rode like a madman the moment my mother told me. Because I could not bear the thought of you waking on that road north, believing I'd thrown you away like a thing of no value, believing I was anything at all like the man who raised me. There it was, his father, again, the shadow that lived behind every single thing he did. Tell me about him, she said. He blinked. What? Your father? You keep mentioning him. Like a wound that has never once closed over. She reached out, took the hand he'd left resting on his knee. Tell me about him, Julian. And for a long moment he was quiet, the fury slowly draining out of him, leaving something far rawer underneath it. He was a great man, he said finally. Everyone said so. At his funeral, in the Lords, powerful, respected. He sat in rooms where the very fate of the country was decided over brandy. And then he died, a breath, surrounded by people who admired his title, and not one, not a single one of them, who truly knew him as a man, including, God forgive me, his own son, Julian. He chose duty over happiness, every single day of his life. He married my mother for her connections and her fortune. He made every decision he ever made for strategy, for advantage. And he was correct always, maddeningly correct, and completely, utterly, hollow. His voice dropped to almost nothing. I held his hand when he died, in that great cold bedroom, and I realized I was holding the hand of a stranger, a respected, important, deeply lonely stranger. And I thought, very clearly, I will not do this. I will not become this thing. He looked up at her, his eyes wet in the candlelight, and then I spent 2 years, becoming exactly that, calculating, cold, careful, burying myself one shovelful at a time, until a girl in a sensible blue gown walked clear across a ballroom floor and asked entirely the wrong man to dance, and reminded me that I had once, long ago, wanted to be something more than simply my father's son. Wren's eyes filled. It wasn't the wrong man, she said. No, his mouth curved. The real one. The unguarded one. I am beginning to suspect it wasn't. And then she remembered the thing she had been carrying since the hedge. The truth she had swallowed in the rose garden. And in the library. And in every single moment since. She pulled her hand gently back from his. "There's something you have to know," she said, "before any of this goes one step further, because I should have told you weeks ago, and I was a coward about it. And it has been eating me alive ever since, Wren. The dare," her voice shook, "the night we met. It wasn't girls and champagne and a foolish rite of passage. It wasn't an accident at all. Lady Augusta paid Phoebe Carlyle to arrange the whole thing, to send a suitable little nobody across that room, to humiliate herself in front of you. I heard them, with my own ears, in the park, the afternoon before the garden party. I heard her say it, plain as day. The dare was a clever touch. The tears came now, freely. Our whole beginning, Julian. Everything you said you valued in me. The honesty. It began with a lie that I knew about, and didn't tell you. So if you want to take all of this back, every word of it, I would understand. Silence. And she braced herself for it. The disgust. The cold withdrawal. The careful courtesy that would mean the end of everything. Instead, he started to laugh. Quiet at first. Then helpless, his head dropping forward, his shoulders, shaking with it. "You're laughing," she said, beyond words. "I have just told you that our entire acquaintance was orchestrated by my own enemy, and you are sitting there, laughing, Wren." He took her face in both his hands, gentle and certain. "Do you not cease? Do you truly not see? They tried with all their might to destroy you, and instead they handed you straight to me. They reached deep into a ballroom to crush a complete stranger they thought was nothing, and they accidentally gave me the only honest person I have ever met in my whole life. Augusta Vane did me the single greatest favor anyone has ever done me, and she will go to her grave never once knowing it." A laugh broke out of Wren, too, wet and astonished, and helpless as his own. "That is a horrible way to look at it. It is a wonderful way to look at it." His thumbs brushed the tears from her cheeks. "And it changes nothing between us. Nothing at all. Except to make me admire you even more than I already did, because you have been carrying that secret. For weeks, terrified the whole time that it would take this away from you. And you told me anyway. When you had every reason in the world to stay silent, and let me go on believing a prettier story." He shook his head slowly, wonderingly. "Do you have any idea how rare that is? In my world, you could have said nothing, and I would never have known the difference. And you told me that. That is the woman I am in love with." The word landed in the quiet candlelit room. Love. He'd said it plain. No hedging, no retreat, no strategy at all. "You. I love you," he said again, like he wanted to be entirely certain she'd heard it the first time. "Not because you're convenient. You are spectacularly inconvenient. Not because you're useful to me. You insulted the most powerful woman in London at a garden party in broad daylight. I love you because you're honest and brave. And because you make me remember the man I once wanted to be." Before all of this buried him alive, Wren couldn't speak. Her throat had closed entirely around her heart. "I know it's fast," he went on. "I know you deserve a proper courtship. Time, certainty, all of it. But I also know that I am finished. Done. With wasting days pretending this is anything other than exactly what it is." His forehead came to rest against hers in the dark. "So stay. Let me court you properly. And if the scandal never fully dies. If you are always, to some small cruel set of people, the provincial girl who trapped a duke, then we will face that together, the two of us, and we will build something. Something that matters a great deal more than any of their opinions ever could. There's still the contract," she whispered. "The forgery. They won't simply stop, Julian. They'll keep coming for me. Then we stop them." His voice hardened. "Properly. Publicly. The way I should have done it months ago." He pulled back to look at her. "The final ball of the season is in 2 weeks' time. The whole ton will be there in their finest. The Vanes will be there. And I am done. Done being strategic while they drag the woman I love through the mud. It is time the truth came out. All of it. In front of everyone. What truth? A slow, dangerous smile spread across his face. This forgery has a signature on it, mine. Forged. Which means that somewhere in this city there is a forger who was paid to make it. And a person who paid him. And my mother, his smile widened. My mother has been making inquiries this past week. You would be astonished, Wren. Truly astonished. At what a dowager duchess can learn. When she finally sets her considerable mind to it, Wren stared at him. You're going to expose them, at a ball. In front of all of London, I am going to give them the chance to expose themselves. First he stood, and drew her up to her feet with him. But yes, if it comes to that, in front of every soul in the room, she should have been frightened. Some small part of her was, but a far larger part, a part she hadn't even known lived inside her, until this exact moment. Felt something else entirely. She had spent her whole life being told to be smaller, sensible, quiet, to know her place and keep to it, and here was a man asking her to stand up, in the very center of the most powerful room in all of England, and refuse to be small, ever again. All right, she said, all right, I'll stay. She took a breath, and I'll fight. But, Julian, I want to do it myself. The standing up, the refusing. I don't want to be rescued like a maiden in a tower. I want to be there. Beside you, not hidden away safe behind you. He looked at her for a long, long moment, and then he lifted her hand to his lips, and pressed a kiss to her knuckles that felt in the dark exactly like a vow. Beside me, he said. Always. The next morning, Wren did not pack. She unpacked. She took the pale blue gown down off the chair and hung it back in the wardrobe where it belonged. And then she sat down at her aunt's little writing desk by the window and began, very carefully, to plan, because she had decided something in the long dark hours of the night. Lying awake, turning it all over and over. She was not going to walk into that ballroom and simply wait to be defended by a man. She was not going to be the trembling girl left standing alone in the center of the floor. Not this time. This time she was going to walk in with the truth held tight in her own two hands. You, said Aunt Honoria from the doorway, watching her unpack with sharp eyes. Look, Emma, different than you did last night, child. I am entirely different than I was last night. Her aunt came in. Sat down on the edge of the bed. Does this remarkable difference have anything at all to do with the fact that I heard a horse in the street at midnight, and a man's low voice in the front hall, and a duke leaving this house at 1 o'clock in the morning? Looking, I might add, as though he'd been struck clean through by lightning. Wren felt her whole face go hot. You heard all of that, my dear. I hear everything in this house. It is precisely how I have survived as a widow for so long. Honoria's eyes were sharp as ever, but there was real warmth underneath them now. The contract would first, then, you knew? I suspected. The signature was simply too perfect, you see. A man signs his own name 1,000 careless different ways across his life. That one looked drawn, copied with great care by a steady hand. A forger's hand. She folded her own hands neatly in her lap. I did try to tell you. Wren, I know. I'm sorry, I was heartbroken, and 19 years old, and entirely convinced the very worst thing was the true thing. Her aunt reached out and touched her cheek with one cool hand. I have been exactly there myself, child. We have all of us been there once. The worst is always so much easier to believe than the best. She paused. Now, tell me what it is you're planning, because I know that particular look on your face. Your mother had it, right before she did something that terrified your poor father half to death. So Wren told her, and her aunt, to her very great surprise, began slowly to smile. The 2 weeks passed in a strange taut, waiting quiet. The invitations had dried up almost entirely after the scandal broke. Not all of them. The Dowager Duchess still included her in small private gatherings. A few genuine friends held loyal through it all. But the broad, glittering, golden world of London society had shut its many doors against her, with the soft finality of coffin lids. And the looks. The whispers that followed her into the few rooms she still entered. Poor thing, thought she could catch herself a duke. So very obvious what she was after all along. At least he had the good sense in the end to see right through her little scheme. Wren endured all of it. but differently now, because she knew something they did not. She knew the doors were all about to fly open again, and she fully intended to walk back through them, on her own 2 feet. With her head held high, the Duke came to her aunt's house nearly every day, not to hide her away from the world, to prepare her for the battle. He told her things about the Vanes, about Lord Vane's debts, which were far, far worse than anyone in society suspected, about votes already quietly slipping away from the man in the Lords, about a coalition that was, very nearly now, complete, and the Dowager Duchess came too, with a small leather folder tucked under her arm that she would not let Wren so much as peek inside. "Not yet, my dear," Beatrice said, her eyes twinkling with something almost like mischief. "A general does not reveal her cannon. Until the morning of the battle. You are enjoying this," Wren accused her, "my dear girl." Beatrice patted her hand fondly. "I have spent 40 long years in rooms where I was permitted only to smile, and to pour the tea, and to say nothing of any consequence whatsoever. Do you have the faintest idea how desperately, how completely I have longed for a battle actually worth the fighting?" And Wren, looking at the old woman's gleaming eyes, believed every word of it. The night of the final ball arrived. Heavy as a held breath in a quiet room, Wren dressed with great care. Not in the elaborate confections the other young women would all be wearing, but in a simple gown of pale gold, the exact color of the wildflowers that grew wild along the Thornmere Drive, because if this was to be her stand, then she would make it as herself. As Wren Ashby of Yorkshire, and as no one else Aunt Honoria looked her over once, slowly, and nodded a single time. "Ready?" "No," Wren said, "but I'm going anyway." The ballroom blazed with the light of 1,000 candles. The cream of all London gathered together for the season's last and greatest night, and Wren felt every single eye in the vast room turn toward her as she entered on her aunt's arm. Felt the whispers rise around her like the tide coming in. She lifted her chin and walked forward, straight into the lion's open mouth. The Dowager found her almost at once, drew her into a warm, fierce embrace. "You came. Your son can be very persuasive. He learned it from the very best." A knowing smile. "He is in the card room just now, making his final arrangements. He'll be out soon enough." She squeezed Wren's hand hard, and something passed quietly between them. In that grip, the small leather folder, tucked discreetly now into Wren's own reticule. "You know what to do, my dear. I know what to do." The first hour was a strange, careful dance all its own. People approached with a mix of caution and naked curiosity. The very worst of the gossips kept their distance, watching from across the room. A few brave friends rallied openly at her side. It felt like standing on the very edge of a high cliff, just waiting for someone to come along and push. The push came from exactly the direction she had known it would. Miss Ashby Cordelia, in a gown of ice blue silk, her beauty cold and flawless as a January morning. "How very brave of you to attend tonight. I was invited." "Oh, certainly you were, but given recent rumors," she let the word trail off, "delicate, cruel. I do so hope you're not here, hoping for some grand declaration. That would be rather embarrassing for everyone." "The only thing I am hoping for tonight," Wren said, level as a tabletop, "is an enjoyable evening." "How sweet." Cordelia stepped closer, her voice dropping low, the lovely mask thinning. "You really don't understand any of it, do you? It's done, you foolish creature. The arrangement is signed and witnessed. He has chosen reality at last. You are a footnote, Miss Ashby. A funny little story he'll tell over the port at dinner parties. The Yorkshire girl, who actually thought she had a chance with a duke, and there it was, the opening. Wren had waited 2 whole weeks for it. Signed, she said. Just loud enough to carry. How very strange, because the Duke himself tells me he has never signed anything of the kind. To anyone, a flicker. In Cordelia's pale blue eyes, he would say that, of course, to spare your feelings. And would he forge his own signature too? To spare my tender feelings? Heads were turning now. The cluster of people standing nearest them, going quiet, leaning in, listening hard. I don't know what you. Of course you do. Wren's heart was hammering against her ribs, but her voice stayed perfectly steady. As steady as it had been the night she crossed a ballroom floor to ask a stranger to dance. Your mother sent me a betrothal contract 3 weeks ago, bearing the Duke's own crest and his signature. The Duke, who happens to be standing right here, said a voice. The crowd parted like the Red Sea, and there he was, the Duke of Westmere, his expression carved from cold marble, his mother at his elbow, and behind the two of them, Lord Vane, red-faced and bewildered, with Lady Augusta beside him in her deep crimson silk, both of them drawn across the floor by the gathering crowd, like sharks drawn to blood in the water. You were saying, Miss Ashby, the Duke said, mild as milk, deadly underneath. Something about my signature, I believe. The whole room had gone very quiet now. A wide ring of silk and jewel and held breath. Hundreds of faces. All of them turned toward the small group at the very center of the floor, and Wren understood, in that moment, exactly where she stood. This was it. The whole long season had bent itself toward this single point. Every cruelty, every cut, every word she'd swallowed down whole, all of it had brought her here, to this exact patch of polished parquet, with the most powerful people in all of England watching her. And she was not afraid. She reached into her reticule and drew out the cream paper. The forgery, this, she said, holding it up high so that the nearest could plainly see it, was delivered to my home 3 weeks ago, by Lady Augusta Vane. It is a betrothal contract between the Duke and her daughter. It bears his crest and his signature. A ripple ran through the crowd. It's a lie, Lady Augusta said. Sharp, far too sharp. She forged it herself, the scheming little did I. Wren turned to the Duke. Your Grace, is that your signature? He took the page from her hand, held it up, studied it, long enough for every soul in the room to watch him studying it. No, he said, clear, carrying to every far corner of the ballroom. It is not. I have never in my life signed a betrothal contract. Not to Miss Vane, not to anyone. This is a forgery. The ripple became a wave. Whispers crashing through the assembly like surf. He is protecting her, Lady Augusta began. Am I? The Duke's voice cut clean through it all. Then perhaps, Lady Augusta, you might explain to this room why a forgery of my signature arrived wrapped inside a cover note, written in your own hand. Lady Augusta went white as bone because Wren had kept that too. The cover note. I write only to spare you further embarrassment. In Lady Augusta's own elegant, vicious hand, and Wren held it up now, high, right beside the forged contract, so that the whole room could see the two of them together. The same paper, Wren said, her voice ringing out now. The same ink, the same hand. One note, signed openly by Lady Augusta Vane. One contract, signed by a Duke who swears before all of you that he never once touched it. She let it land in the silence. I am from Yorkshire. We're simple people up there. But even we can plainly see. When two things have come from the very same writing desk, the silence was absolute, total, ringing in the ears. And then, from the very edge of the crowd, a new voice, Mother, quiet, trembling, but carrying somehow to every ear. Stop, please. Every head turned. Cordelia. She had gone pale as her own ice-blue gown, her hands clenched into fists at her sides, and she was looking at her mother, with an expression Wren had never once seen on her lovely face before. Cordelia, Lady Augusta, hissed at her. Be silent. At once, no. The girl's voice cracked. But she did not stop. I won't. Not anymore, Mother. I am so tired. I am so tired of all of it, Cordelia. I never wanted to marry him. The words came tumbling out now, fast, like water through a dam that has finally broken open. I told you that, over and over and over again. I begged you to listen. He does not love me. He never once did. He loves her. Everyone in this entire room can see it plainly. Everyone but you. And I have spent 3 months, smiling and lying and being unforgivably cruel, to a girl whose only crime in the world was being honest, while you forged contracts and paid for dares at balls, and ruined her good reputation. In my name, a gasp swept through the whole room like wind through wheat. The dare, Cordelia said, turning now to face Wren directly, tears standing bright in her eyes. It's true, all of it. My mother paid for it. Phoebe told me weeks ago. I knew, and I said nothing. Because I was afraid of her. I have been afraid of her my whole life." She looked back at her mother, and something in her young face hardened to iron. "But I am not afraid of you anymore." Lady Augusta lunged a step forward. "You ungrateful little—" Enough. The single word came from the Dowager Duchess. Beatrice Hertford, the Dowager Duchess of Westmere, stepped into the very center of the ring of watching faces and opened her small leather folder at last. "Lady Augusta," she said, pleasant as fresh poured tea, "I have spent the last 2 weeks asking a great many questions around this city. I am old and widowed, and, I confess, dreadfully bored most days. And it is truly astonishing what people will say in front of an old woman, whom they have all long since stopped bothering to notice." She lifted out the first page. "Here is a sworn statement from a man named Pollard, an engraver of Cheapside, who was paid £40 to copy a particular ducal crest and to practice a particular signature." She lifted the next page, "and here is a record from your own husband's bank of certain debts that would make this entire room go quite faint were I to read the figures aloud." A small, terrible smile. "Shall I read them aloud, Lady Augusta?" Lord Vane made a strangled, choking sound. "Augusta, what in God's name is she?" "And here," Beatrice said, "sweetest of all, the final blow, is a copy of a settled dressmaker's account for one Miss Phoebe Carlyle, paid in full by you." The very week of the autumn ball, the room exploded into whispers, and Lady Augusta Vane, the most powerful woman in all of London, stood frozen in the very center of it all, her crimson gown like an open wound against the candlelight, her mouth opening and closing and opening again. No sound at all coming out of it. Exactly the way she had once made her own daughter stand. Exactly the way she had hoped and plotted and paid good money to make Wren stand. Alone, in the center of a floor, surrounded on every side by judging eyes, the hunter, become the hare. "You'll regret this," Lady Augusta whispered, "to no one, to everyone, to the cruel air itself." "No," said the Duke, stepping forward at last, his voice carrying to every last soul in that enormous room. "You will. Your husband's votes are no longer necessary to me. I have found others. My tenant bill passes the Lords next week, without a single Vane name attached anywhere to it." He paused. "And your threats to this woman, your campaign against her, it ends tonight, here, in front of all these witnesses." He turned to Wren, and the whole room turned with him. "Miss he said, and his voice, which had been ice and iron, went suddenly, achingly soft. "Would you do me the very great honor of the next dance?" The orchestra, as if it had been waiting all night long for this exact moment, as if it had always, somehow, been waiting, struck up a waltz. Wren put the forged contract back into her reticule, where it would stay, a keepsake of the night she stopped forever, being small, and she took his offered hand. "I would be honored," she said. The crowd parted like water before them, exactly the way it had that first night, when a provincial girl in a sensible blue gown had walked, terrified, clear across a ballroom floor, and asked entirely the wrong man to dance. Except, he hadn't been the wrong man at all. He'd been the only right one in the whole glittering room. They danced. And this time she did not forget a single step of it. This time she did not feel 300 staring eyes like stones piled on her shoulders. She felt them like sunlight on her face, because she had earned this. Every bit of it, inch by inch, cut by cut, truth by hard-won truth. That, the Duke murmured low against her ear, was magnificent. That, Wren said, was long overdue. He laughed. The real one, the unguarded one, the one she had pulled, against all odds, out of a man who had entirely forgotten how to do it. "I need to tell you something," he said, as they turned together through the pattern. "Here, now." In front of all of them, her heart stuttered in her chest. "Here? In front of everyone." He met her eyes and held them. "I love you. Not because you are convenient. You are the single least convenient woman in all of England. Not because you are useful to me. You have just, in the space of 10 minutes, dismantled the most powerful family in this room. I love you because you are honest, and because you are brave, and because you make me remember the man I wanted to be. Before duty ever buried him, Julian, she whispered, I know it's fast, I know you deserve a slow and proper courtship, but I am asking you, publicly, with all of London watching, so that no one, ever, can call you a rumor again, or a footnote, or a girl who only thought she had a chance. His voice dropped. Intimate? Somehow, despite the hundreds of years, let me court you. With intention, with the full and certain understanding that I am choosing you, and that nothing at all, about that choice is an accident. The whole ballroom had gone silent again. 300 people, holding a single breath, and Wren felt her eyes fill with tears. But this time they were entirely the right kind. Yes, she said, simple, clear. I would be honored. The smile that broke across his face transformed it completely. Joy, pure joy, where the careful armored control had lived for 2 long years. He looked young, unburdened, free at last. Thank you, he said, and then, louder, for the whole watching room to hear. Thank you. The music swelled around them, and they danced, while all of London digested what it had just witnessed with its own eyes. A duke, choosing love over advantage, a provincial nobody, who had walked alone into the lion's den, and walked out of it the future Duchess of Westmere by the time the waltz ended. The whispers had changed their tune entirely, not malicious any longer, calculating. Because if Westmere was serious, and there was no doubt left in any mind now that he was, then Wren Ashby was no scandal to be dismissed over the port. She was the woman he had chosen. In front of everyone. And in this world, power always followed love. Like a long shadow on a summer evening. 6 months later, snow fell at Thornmere. Wren sat at the great Broadwood Grand in the music room, playing Bach, technical, complex, the kind of piece that took her whole mind and both her hands. Outside the tall windows, the first real snow of the season drifted down, soft, silent, covering the wild tangled flower beds in clean, forgiving water. The door opened quietly behind her. She didn't stop playing, but she smiled. The Duke sat down beside her on the bench, close enough that their shoulders touched. Your brothers arrive tomorrow, he said. When the last note had faded, I know. I'm nervous about it. They'll love me, will they, though? I bribed them. With horses, his expression was entirely unrepentant. 3, excellent breeding, all of them. 1 each. You didn't. I absolutely did. I courted their approval, as thoroughly as I once courted yours. Because I want your family to know that I value you enough to value them as well. Wren laughed, and leaned her head against his shoulder, and watched the snow come down past the glass. She thought, sometimes, of that first night, of the 1,000 candles, the whispers, the cruel lie that had sent her trembling clear across a ballroom floor. Lady Augusta reached out a hand to crush a stranger she thought was nothing, and had, by purest accident, handed Wren the only life she had ever truly wanted. She thought of Cordelia, too, who had gone to live with an aunt in Bath. Free of her mother at long last. They wrote to each other now, strange and unexpected and good. 2 young women who had once been pieces on the same cruel board, and who had walked away from it, together. In the end, what are you thinking? He asked. That none of this should ever have worked, she said. A dare, a lie, a forgery. By every rule there is, I should be in Yorkshire right now. Behind a plow horse. You'd have hated that. I would have hated it enormously. He turned to face her on the bench, and there was something new in his eyes. Something certain, and just a little nervous, which she had never once seen there before. I'm going to ask your father's permission tomorrow, he said, and then, if he agrees, and if you are willing, I would like very much to be married by spring. Her heart stuttered. That's fast. We have known each other 8 months now. I have courted you properly, met your aunt, bribed your brothers. His mouth curved. I do not need more time to be certain of you. But if you do, I don't, she said. Before she could second-guess it, before fear could find even the smallest foothold, I'm sure. I've been sure for months now. I was only ever afraid to hope for it. Then hope, he said. And he cupped her face in both his hands. Exactly the way he had that night at midnight, when he'd ridden through the dark to stop her from believing the very worst of him. Because I am not going anywhere. Not ever. And she kissed him, soft and sure. and full to the brim with promise. Outside, the snow kept falling, silent, steady, covering the whole world in clean, new white. Inside, the fire crackled low in the grate, and the old piano held notes that had already faded into the air, but somehow still seemed to linger. This was home, not London, not Yorkshire, not any place a purse could find on a map. This, the man beside her on the bench, the music between them, the future the two of them were building, with their own two honest hands. A girl had once crossed a crowded room, afraid, in a sensible blue gown, sent out like a hare before the hounds, and she had found, at the very end of that long and frightening floor, not the ruin her enemies had so carefully intended for her, but the truest thing she would ever know. So, if you take only one thing away from Wren's story tonight, let it be this. The world will always try to make you smaller than you are. It will send you across frightening floors. It will whisper that you don't belong here, that you're a nobody. A footnote. A girl behind a plow. Don't you believe a word of it, because the most powerful thing you will ever own, in any ballroom, in any season, in any life at all, is the truth, and the simple courage to speak it out loud, even when your voice shakes. Especially then.